Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, as Ukraine war news update for the 22nd of December 2023, first part thereof. And before we get into the news, and as we approach Christmas, it's the 22nd of December, 3 days away from Christmas Day for many of us, I just want to highlight a film that's now been nominated for 2 Oscars, and bloody rightfully so. So this is a bit of an emotional appeal. I guess this isn't like newsworthy, apart from obviously that this film has been nominated for 2 Oscars. It is 20 Days in Mariupol, and as you know, because if you watch me, I rant enough to you. As you know, the world is slipping its grasp on reality. I think in many ways we are forgetting the trials and tribulations of those people in Ukraine as we get on with our lives, as we get distracted with other things that are happening around the world and in our own countries. And our politicians largely remain ineffective or are compromised in making decisions for the good and the right of the world, and indeed for their own countries. They are compromised by desires to achieve one thing over another, where that one thing I don't think has the international importance that this conflict does. If we allow Putin to prevail in this conflict, then goodness me, we welcoming in a new era of darkness, I would claim. And this film, 20 Days in Mariupol, just reminds us possibly what we have forgotten. The despicable events that took place at the beginning of the war that seems so long ago now, 2 years ago. It just is, it's a terrible thing, this war. And Mariupol is, I think, one of the prime pieces of evidence to show the horrors of this war that has been brought upon Ukraine by Putin and by his regime. That dictator is responsible for this war. I am horrified by what I see in this film, that I think is a must watch for everyone. I'm horrified by it, and I'm almost horrified that I've forgotten how terrible it was. As we move through each day and we pack our heads with so much more information, whether it be to do with the Ukraine war or other things, we forget sometimes the horrors that have taken place, or they become normalized. This film is a truly tremendous piece of documentary evidence and filmmaking expertise. It is very good, but it's a tough watch, but it's a must watch. Let's just watch the trailer, because what I'm going to implore you to do today is to find some time to watch this, or over the next week. You know, we are just getting close to Christmas. Just remember that, you know, Christmas for some people is obviously going to be a very different experience, and just keep a thought for some of those people, remembering that this is, or has been, the existence or the extinguishing of that existence for so many people.
Someone once told me, wars don't start with explosions. They start with silence.
Лично видим визуально. Танки зашли с надписью Z.
Город Мариуполь блокирован со всех сторон.
Russians have entered the city. The war has begun, and we have to tell its story.
Хорошо, что тут есть пресса. Снимайте.
This is painful to watch, but it must be painful to watch.
Вони нанесли бомбовий удар. Вон там! Хирургический корпус, вот там!
А, вы госпитале, да?
Мамочка!
Не знаешь, куда бежать.
Чего расстраиваешься?
Не хочу, чтобы я умирала.
репортажи ваши разошлись. Конечно, огромное дело сделать.
Они столько пережили с мамами.
If the world saw everything that happened in Mariupol, it would give at least some meaning to this horror. My brain will desperately want to forget all this, but the camera will not let it happen.
So I
The
guess,
film-
you know, let that experience for those people have some meaning. Watch that film and be enraged by it. I hate Putin with every fibre of my existence. And that is a hatred and an anger that's been reignited by watching this truly incredible piece of filmmaking. I think in the US you might be able to watch it through PBS because it's a PBS Associated Press co-production. In the UK you can just get it through all the normal places. I've just watched it through Virgin Media on my cable at home, but you can get it through Amazon, you know, YouTube even. You can buy it through YouTube, Google Films and whatnot. It is a great film. Here the review says, but the full material is wrenching. This film is really a broadcast from hell on earth. Chernov shows in unflinching detail the shattered bodies of men, women and children, and even more unbearably shows the agony of loved ones sobbing over their corpses. A blaze of emotional pain, almost obscene in its directness. And Chernov and his photographer Yevgeny Malotka, are themselves part of the story. Their subjects are always reacting to their appearance. Sometimes they angrily tell the filmmakers to go away, but sometimes, and with almost the same kind of despairing rage, they tell them to stay, to record what they are going through, to be witness to the horror. Just make sure you take time to watch this, and it seems odd for me to say, but get angry. Get bloody angry, because through that anger is the motivation to do something about this, to make a change, to stop this from happening. And it seems so frustrating that we are at some kind of political impasse in the EU and in the US with regard to military aid that just allows Putin and his regime to continue this onslaught. It just frustrates the heck out of me. So yeah, please do go and watch this. And one of the things that really got to me in this, you know, I ran against disinformation, but actually at that maternity, they were at the maternity hospital that was hit. They walked around it, they interviewed the people, they were there, and they saw the horrors in it, and it was despicable. And straight after, and I remember this, but straight after that happened, the Russian disinformation machine kicked into gear, and they were saying they were all paid actors there, and it was all just completely false. And I remember all that stuff coming out. And when those disinformation claims find purchase in our Western media, in the social media, when people spread those lies, it does such untold damage. But it's so vital to go back to the source material and look at actually what happened. And these guys document that, and it should be a punch in the face to disinformation entities spreading lies. But unfortunately, you know, it's not so simple. But yeah, go and watch it. Right, to start the news. And remember, these figures represent real human beings. Military men, not civilians, it may be emphasized. 1,080 personnel lost, according to the General Staff figures for Ukraine for the day before. All the caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. That is a high number, over 1,000. Another tough day for the Russians, although, as I keep saying, no doubt very tough for the Ukrainians in a number of places along the front line. 9 tanks, fairly significant, but not as high as we have seen. 18 APVs, likewise. 24 artillery systems is a decent number of artillery pieces lost. And again, if you take 20-30% off these are still tough figures for the Russians, although not as tough as we have seen at some points during this last week. 25 vehicles and fuel tanks and 9 pieces of special equipment. Significant there, 9 pieces of special equipment, if that is things like electronic warfare stuff and ISI, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and that will be useful for the Ukrainians. Indeed, if we look at Andrew Perpetua's tossing up of the figures, he's a mapper that checks out all the socials to see what has been lost and has a database. We can see that this is a kind of ratio that the Ukrainians would like to see every single day. This is maybe a 5-to-1 Russian to Ukrainian loss ratio, where the Ukrainians, have lost not particularly high value equipment. Yeah, there's an M777, a couple of older tanks, and a boat. But the Russians themselves have lost another TOS-1A. I think, is that the third one this week in Krinky alone, in the Krinky area? That's a thermobaric munition. Another multiple launch rocket system, BM-21 Grad. Some T-80 tanks, a number of BMPs and BTRs there, as well as, so those are infantry fighting vehicles, and an armoured personnel vehicle, and some trucks and civilian vehicles as well. So quite a list there. Also, just a whole bunch of unknown equipment right at the end, just so destroyed you can't really work out what it is, or the imagery isn't quite high enough resolution. But yeah, that's a bad day at the office for the Russians, and kind of what we're expecting given some of the figures we have seen this week for Russian losses. Remember, that's only going to be a fraction of what is claimed, because you don't always have the evidence put on social media that is given to the general staff. So that will only be a fraction always. A destroyed Russian truck here. Now, this is why this is kind of weird, is that there has been drone activity around Rostov, and I don't know if that's Rostov, the oblast in general, or Rostov-on-Don, the city in Russia. But here's a KAMAZ truck just on fire on the highway, apparently near Rostov. So I don't know what's going on there, whether that's just a random engine has caught fire, and that's the end of that, whether it's partisan activity or whether it's a strike. But it's unlikely to be a strike because that's a moving target, not particularly high value in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, I don't really know why that is on fire where it is, but it is a Mustang KAMAZ 5350 on the northern bypass highway near Rostov on fire. Now, I mentioned the TOS-1. There's more footage of the TOS-1 being destroyed in Krinky. It's the third one being destroyed in that area in the last week, I think. So yeah, the Russians have lost quite a number of those fairly high value targets. Now, going on to distant strikes, standoff munitions, 24 out of 28 Shaheeds were destroyed over Ukraine at night, which is another good interception rate for those. However, one did get through, and there is some footage out there of it hitting a building in Kiev. And I presume that is one that's not been affected by the air defense. It looks like it went directly into it there, you can see, but actually I can't tell. Maybe it was hit by air defense. But that caused damage to this residential building in Kiev. That is a rare kind of, either a rare strike or as I say, air defense working, but a more significant explosion than we have seen in Kiev. And I've been asking, why is it that the Russians are throwing all these Shaheeds and not releasing, large waves of missiles of late? And one of the reasons might be that they are waiting for the F-16s to get to the air bases before releasing, truly horrific waves of cruise missiles at those air bases. And that is a very plausible explanation. But actually, here we've got Michael Clark giving his opinion on why it might be. And I think this is pretty plausible, to be fair.
And it's important to bring them down. What the Russians are hoping is that if they can overwhelm this multi-layered system with cheap drones, they'll make the Ukrainians fire off more expensive missiles up to the Patriot battery and leave holes in their ammunition stocks. Their ballistic missiles can then come through. And there is quite a lot of evidence so far that the Russians are holding back several hundred powerful ballistic missiles, and they're firing off cheaper missiles and drones, hoping to run down Ukrainian stocks over the winter. And if they can find some gaps in Ukraine's ammunition, and they might if we don't supply them, then believe me, they'll pour ballistic missiles through onto Ukraine sometime in the coldest time of the winter and really try to hurt them more so than they did last year. I don't think they'll succeed, but that is what they're undoubtedly planning to try.
And I think that's a very good explanation of why we're seeing drone attack after drone attack and no missiles and a weird lack of missiles, given that they have supposedly stockpiled. We have perhaps evidence this is working as well by point of fact that the US is appealing to Japan. Well, not just for recently. 155mm shells are going to backfill 155mm shells from Japan, which is interesting, but also are looking to get an export of Patriot missiles from Japan as well. So I think Ukraine are desperate for Patriot missiles, and I'm sure Raytheon, who I think makes missiles as well, will be making those toot sweet. Right, as we move on, it's worth remembering this. So don't buy the arguments that Ukraine is weak. Yes, they need more military aid, and they need it immediately. But this time last year, there were widespread power outages and unsuppressed drone attacks. Not so this year. So when we are seeing 34 out of 35 drones being shot down, 24 out of 28 last night, and going back for the last week or so, the interception rate has been absolutely brilliant. Whereas last year, most of those drones were just getting through and causing all sorts of damage to all sorts of infrastructure. We must remember how far Ukraine has come. And while it's easy to get sidetracked with the loss of certain bits of territory along the front line, in the whole scheme of things, Ukraine are in a far stronger position now than they have been since the beginning of the war. Russia has hit Toretsk, the mines at Toretsk in the Donetsk region. So that is not far from Bakhmut, south of Bakhmut. They've hit the region with air bombs, aviation bombs. 3 civilians were killed, 5 more were wounded, according to the Interior Ministry. And there was some pretty difficult footage of rescue efforts going on in Toretsk, trying to save people from under rubble. Again, it seemed to be examples of Russia hitting non-military infrastructure with those big aviation bombs. On the other hand, Makivka was reported yesterday as being without gas, and as a gas supply pipe was hit and is still burning. In the distance, you can see the color of the sky. Makivka has been hit a number of times. That's in the Donetsk region as well, I believe. And Crimea came under attack yesterday. Occupiers are silent, but locals write about explosions in the Kerch and Crimea Bridge is closed. Smoke seen rising, but the photo is unverified. So Ukrainians are still busy striking. And Donetsk city itself was hit again yesterday. Multiple explosions, smoke pouring out after a strike in the city, and quite a few reporting on that yesterday variously. Another video looking at the smoke billowing out over the center of occupied Donetsk right now, awaiting further details. And the fire started at a building at Technical University. There was a specific military department there, and it was a base of the Sparta battalion for many years. Presumably Ukraine intel found they were still there. In fact, I'm fairly sure that Sparta battalion headquarters was hit previously in Donetsk as well, but I might be wrong. And then we move on to actually Mariupol being struck the day before. So this isn't yesterday. So an update on yesterday. So this was 2 days ago now. Explosion on Mariupol, which looks to have caused considerable damage. Ukraine's ex-mayoral advisor says at least 10 of Russia's invaders were injured, and a base of equipment was destroyed. Here's a sort of Google translation of what was going on yesterday. Heavenly Punishment visited the territory of former Klado Kombinats in the Kalmy district, where the occupier carelessly hid BC and equipment. Now he hid it, now he can't tell. Everything is negative. Together there was at least 10 non-humans who were taken to the hospital at night in a serious condition twice a week. Nice record, just a gorgeous day. Did air defense shoot everything down? A bit sort of battered translation there, but you get the point that something fairly important was hit in Mariupol, so they are still striking down to Mariupol. And Rostov, just this morning, there are drones flying over Rostov. And as I said earlier, I don't know if that's Rostov city or just the oblast in general. So, yeah, the Ukrainians still trying to hit targets within Russia. And then we go on to other bits and pieces. So, According to NASA analysts, about 6.4 million tons of wheat and almost 1.5 million tons of sunflower seeds were collected in the territories of Ukraine temporarily occupied by the Russians this year. So the Russians are still stealing effectively. They've invaded territories, they've taken control, and they're stealing basically food, which is pretty criminal in my books. Now, I saw a clip of Putin at the beginning of the war saying, this is not a war, it's a special military operation, and we are not going to forcibly occupy territories. It's just worth remembering that Putin has outright lied during the whole length of this war. But right at the beginning, when he said very publicly what he was going to do, it was on that 20 days in Mariupol, actually. They showed him saying this stuff, and then as soon as his speech finished, they started hitting Mariupol. But literally, the speech finished, and then bang, 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 bang. And munitions hitting the residential areas of Mariupol. He is just a liar. I don't know why people are convinced by the Russian narrative that the Ukrainians are to blame in this, or that it's more nuanced than it really is. Yeah, everything is nuanced, of course it is, but this is the most obvious example about how one side are the bad guys in any kind of conflict that I've seen and heard about for an awful long time. And yet, still that narrative, the Russians are doing such a good job of getting into people's minds. Annoys me. Anyway, Anton Gerashchenko says the Russians are now experiencing increased consumer demand. They're expecting a shortage of goods and high inflation in the near future. So expecting a shortage of goods. So they are buying everything they can, starting with apartments and ending with electronics. According to the monitoring of IEF RAS, conducted jointly with colleagues from the Institute of Psychology RAS and the Institute of Psychological and Economic Research, by the end of 2024, the average Russian expects inflation of 50% and a dollar exchange rate at the level of 120 rubles per dollar. Remember, it was all about worrying about the 100, getting over the 100 mark. But note that this is a survey of psychologists, but it seems that the Central Bank of Russia agrees with them when it raises the interest rate. So things are not looking good in Russia at the moment, economically speaking. By the way, that's an image of the Putin. That is the different Putin. I don't know if just a whole head shape. Like that is the old Putin, and not the one you see now. The smaller, rounded faced Putin. And I know he's on like steroids and whatnot, but that is a different head shape than that one. Anyway, just a sidebar there. Russia splashes $12 billion to keep the aviation sector in the air, according to Reuters, and this is a real challenge for Russia. The aviation sector, it's one sector that is most affected by sanctions, it appears. Russia has handed out more than $12 billion in state subsidies and loans to keep its aviation sector afloat since Western sanctions over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine cut off supplies of key parts and maintenance services. A Reuters analysis shows, dependent on foreign-made aircraft, Russia faces a daunting task of developing its aviation industry alone with domestically sourced parts, while buying aircraft from foreign lessors to avoid more of its fleet being seized. Western plane makers Airbus and Boeing halted supplies of services and spare parts in March 2022 and dropped regular maintenance support for flag carrier Aeroflot and other Russian airlines. Since then, it spent $12 billion supporting the industry, including aircraft manufacturing and financial assistance for airlines. Reuters calculations show, based on data from the Ministry of Finance and Accounts Chamber, which oversees budget execution, that's almost twice as much as was being spent in 2020 to 2021, when the pandemic caused a drastic reduction in air travel. So, there is that to take into account. But it is a struggling industry at the moment. Russian propagandist filipe. So we need to pay attention to what Russians are saying. As I keep telling you, they are telling you how bad they are. They're being very overt with their genocidal rhetoric. They're being very obvious with their intentions or what they would like, and this is sanctioned by the Russian government. So when they say things like when they advance the agenda of, quote, disavowing the documents about the dissolution of the Soviet Union, they are telling you that they want to go back to the times of the Soviet Union and retake under their control all the nations that have independence since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. This is what they're saying, and this has not been shut down by the state. This is state-sanctioned propaganda. They're openly saying they want to resurrect the USSR. And meanwhile, you're seeing stuff like this. These videos, I don't know if you watch them, they've got these camps and, like, instead of going to, like, a local choir or local, I don't know, Boy Scouts or whatever floats your boat, they've got people getting dressed up in rose-tinted views of what the Soviet Union was like, and then doing marching ceremonies. And it's like the US, everyone's forgotten. Oh, the USSR was awesome. Yeah, it was all brilliant. Yeah, no, but there wasn't like mass murders of dissenters and people sent to gulags and a lack of freedom and liberty and lack of ability to buy things and a complete communist dictatorship. No, it was all wonderful. Just everyone's sinking their own propaganda. They're just existing in some weird, warped, parallel dimension. And talking about disinformation and propaganda, Ilya Ponomarenko here saying such accounts must be suspended for the massive spread of war propaganda inciting hatred toward a European country attacked in a war of annihilation. So, what's going on here? Well, just like I was saying, that with regard to 20 days in Mariupol and when the maternity hospitals hit, as soon as that happened, the Russian disinformation entities were spreading lies about those people being paid actors and this and that. As soon as, I don't know if you know, but in Czechia yesterday, in Charles University in Prague, in Czechia yesterday, there was a shooter, a student, I believe, that shot and killed 14 people. Like the worst mass shooting either ever or for a very long time or whatever. It's a terrible incident. As soon as that happened, and I saw this online, as soon as that happened, the claims were it was a Ukrainian refugee and it was a Ukrainian this and that, and that narrative was flooding the information spaces straight away. And of course, that just does untold damage to people that don't know how to fact check, and or it lands on fertile soil where people kind of want to hear that, who are already like going towards being anti-Ukrainian. This is like, oh yeah, and that. You know, these claims like he was a Ukrainian student from Dnipro who's accepted to the Charles University under the refugee program without exams. And the Czech police have released the preliminary information that the shooter was a Czech native and was inspired by a terrorist attack in Russia. So this is just like the opposite of what actually was true, which is really sad that this gets out there straight away. He received a summons to mobilize into the Ukrainian army, and the university on the same day submitted an application for its expedition back to his country. And as the community notes writes, no, everything written in this tweet is made up. He had nothing to do with Ukraine. He was a Czech citizen and native Czech. So, and the same person here saying it's also known that university employees are very alarmed and are afraid that this information will get into the press. Security services are on site and students are asked to sign a non-disclosure document. This info is confirmed 100%. And then someone else saying, no, that is just completely made up, as is his whole thread. And this is a pro-Russian source, just saying it. Sources specified that before the shooting, Kozak raised the Ukrainian flag on the roof. False, the flag raised on the 24th of February 2022, as evidenced by the Facebook post by the faculty. Again, another lie. But these just hit straight away. And we must be so careful to fight this. We're careful about what we read, and also we must be inspired enough to fight this disinformation, as I try to do on a daily basis. And go back to the beginning of this video. Please watch 20 Days in Mariupol, and please get bloody angry, and please use that anger really effectively to bring about change in other people's lives, or just to remember how terrible this conflict is. So that anger keeps the fire burning in our consciousnesses, and hopefully our consciences as well. Thank you.